Hi, everyone. This is Keith Caldwell with Our Special Needs Children, and I have a special guest, Martina Sholiton, who is a former special education director and SELPA director.
There are administrators that literally tell you, just wait until they sue us.
Martina, hello. How are you doing? And thank you for joining us.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for having me, Keith. I'm very excited to get the word out and to helping parents being able to prepare for their IEPs so they're not so nervous.
Excellent. Well, Martina, I found out about you when you posted in one of my Google Plus communities, and I said, wow, what an interesting concept. Someone who used to be the enemy is now working in work. Well, some of us parents think that special ed directors are not always 100% supportive of our kids, but so anyhow, I thought it was an interesting perspective, so I wanted to have you on the show to sort of give a perspective on that. Tell me about PACES and what PACES does. Is that your company?
Yeah, PACES is my company, and I started it because I was working in special ed for over 30 years, and in my last position, I was basically told to not serve kids, and I was like, I can't do it, to say no to parents when I knew that certain programs really needed to be in place and we had the resources. So when I was given that information, I made a plan to open up my own advocacy company so that I could still do the same thing, but on the other side of the table, and support parents and let them know and validate their fears of when they think that districts are lying or denying or delaying services, that they really are.
Right. I've always assumed that, and I don't want to, I know we have more on store for that, and that's probably another topic, but there are instances where districts do not tell us the truth, do not give us the full story, deny services, delay services, and for all kinds of various reasons, usually relating to monetary reasons. Is that what your understanding is?
Usually it's due to monetary reasons, but not always. For some districts, it is a matter of resource. I've been stuck in situations where I needed to get physical therapy services for a child, and there just wasn't a person to do it. But I do think that school districts use the money line a lot, and it's gotten to the point where I've even had clients and parents tell me that they don't want to get this certain service because they can pay for it for themselves because they want to allocate the monies to another child that won't necessarily get the services because they're taking up the financial resources of the district. So they've really gotten the word out very well, but as far as the financial resources for school districts and agencies and public agencies, yes, the money has been cut. However, that does not allow them to deny children the right to a free and appropriate public education.
Excellent. Thanks. I mean, it's good to hear. It's just, and one of the questions we'll get to later on that was asked by a friend of mine is what kind of recourse do we have as parents? But we'll talk about that later. So I want to dig into, from a former special education director, SELPA director, how do we have more effective outcomes for our kids for IEPs? I think that's really what we're going to get to. So with that, I'll let you go ahead and get started in your presentation.
So today we're going to talk about improving the outcomes of your children's IEPs. And if you don't have an IEP yet, or if you're in a 504 status, or you're just getting started that you know something's wrong, you're still going to get a lot out of this presentation. So what thing you need to know and keep in mind all the time is that this is always a process. It's not an event, okay? Having the IEP is like the most fearful piece of the puzzle, but what you can do ahead of time is alleviate that stress by, one, asking for your child's records. So it's a process, not an event. So you always want to have a copy of all your child's records, and whenever I do any type of trainings, I always recommend parents get a notebook right after the training, put holes in all of those records and stick them in the notebook. And you always need to ask for data prior to the IEP. So if it's your first time at the rodeo, ask for those assessments in advance. Yes, you can do that. Does the school district have to provide that, or agency? No, but typically they will. School districts are more on board with you being informed before you get to the IEP. If they want you to choose a classroom or program, always go and observe it. Do not agree to it at the table. Always ask for drafted goals in advance so that you can look at them. And if you don't understand what they mean or say, then you should be getting on the phone with that person who wrote those goals to have them explain them to you, so you're not wasting the IEP time, because the IEP, you want to talk about what your child's going to get for services. So ask for the assessments in advance, ask questions. I think, Keith, you've attached a sheet that has popular questions to ask or bring to your IEP.
I know, but we'll make sure everyone who gets it.
Okay, great. And then tell them who you're bringing in advance. That's really helpful. Legally, you only have to tell them when you're bringing a lawyer. But if you're bringing a friend, a neighbor, an advocate, you know, let them know in advance so that they can prepare, because sometimes if you bring someone like me to the table and you don't let them know in advance, or I don't call them and tell them who I am and where I've been, they want to be able to have the proper ammunition at the table too, because once you get an advocate in place or an attorney in place, they tend to want to have someone higher level from the district office or a program specialist so that they have more of a resource in regards to what services they can agree to at the IEP. Put in writing that you want to record the meeting 24 hours in advance. Even if you're in a good place with your team, always record the meeting. There's always stuff that you miss. You never know when something's going to go sideways. So always record the IEP. I have all my clients record their IEPs when I attend, all of them. Okay, there we go. Okay, warning signs. Is your child getting suspended? Okay, and you can read that. If you're having repetitive suspensions, are they for the same things? Is there any type of behavior plan? Do you have a contract plan if your child doesn't have an IEP? You know, how long has the behavior plan been in force? Is there data collection? You want to see the data. Districts do tend to fail in the arena of collecting data. They come to the table and it's how they feel about your kid that day. Getting feelings from comments made that is your fault and your child. So a lot of times there's a finger pointing when districts aren't able to provide the programming that your child needs because, one, the teacher goes out on maternity leave, the sub that you get is awful. You have a paraprofessional that barely ever shows up to work and they can't get a sub. You know, there's lots of issues that school districts can't control and there's some that they can. But regardless, when things start to go a little bit south, it's not unusual for school districts to make you feel like you're not a good parent, you don't have good boundaries, and your child's just a bad child. So a lot of times communication is really the problem. You want to set up a positive relationship and positive communication and demand the communication if they're not so willing to come forward with it. So what do you do if you start to see—
Martina, let me ask you a quick question, because I'm sure other parents have. I know a lady I talked to in the past. When it comes to collecting data, and you made a great comment that it's about how they feel about your child that day, is there anything that districts are required to collect, or can they come in and say, I pretty much have collected no data? I know for kids with autism, my son has autism, data collection is so important because we can sort of see the behaviors, what the antecedents were, all those types of things. And I often go in and they have no information at all. Is there anything that districts are required to do, or can they actually come into an IEP and have collected nothing?
Okay, so when a parent needs to prove what services okay, let me back up. A district has to prove yes or no whether a child has a need for a service. So for example, the big kahuna is, I want a one-to-one aid.
Right.
Okay. Well, a lot of times districts will slow you down and say, well, we have a whole process for that we do an assessment and we collect data. And it's like, okay, well then I want to see it. And usually they do a pretty good job. If they have a written policy and procedure in place for whether a child needs additional one-to-one services, it's usually pretty solid. But I definitely have ran across districts where they just stole it from another district. They have no idea how to implement it, and they don't really do it well. In order for a district to tell you no, they have to tell you in writing why they will not agree to a service or a placement or a classroom that you requested. They have to tell you in writing. And a lot of times districts do not do that. So the short answer to your question is yes, they have to provide data all the time. That's their job. A lot of teachers and paraprofessionals will say that's not my job, but it is. So when this is kind of happening, you feel like your child needs more services, the communication of the classroom isn't working, you know, your kid's coming home and they're starting to not like school, or another kid's bullying or picking on them, you need to call a meeting right away. Do it in writing, because then they have 30 days to schedule the meeting. And so you want to keep them to their timelines, because when you start getting involved with needing someone like me to the table, I'm going to ask you for all that information. Did you put it in writing? Did you send an email? Did you get it stamped by the office? Do you have a date that they received it? Because they will say, oh, it got lost in the email. Our email got dumped today. You know, there's always lots of excuses
Right.
that districts can come up with. And I'll tell you, being an administrator for 9 years in multiple different administrative positions, I've made some of those up. So I totally understand when and see when districts are lying.
Mhm.
So you want to do everything in writing. Keep every email. Every email you get, as little or insignificant as you think it may be, print it out, put it in your notebook. Have a section of emails. And if you have a child that has specific behavioral issues, have a special section for just the behavior plan information. You know, the little sheets that you get home with smiley faces or not smiley faces, whatever they're using. And then anytime after a phone call, always follow it up with an email. Thank you for talking to me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. See, you got to set that up to thank them, because not many people get thanked in the teaching world.
Right.
You know, and so it's really important to create that positive relationship. And then after face-to-face, always follow it up with an email. Thanks for talking to me today. I really appreciate your time. In that discussion, we talked about blah, blah, blah. These were the outcomes. This is what we're going to do next, or this is how I'm going to support the classroom for the Halloween party, or, you know, whatever it is. Always follow it up with an email, because you always want to document that you are a clean, clear communicator. Because a lot of times when either attorneys or advocates, or you get someone else involved, other professionals, physicians, doctors, psychiatrists, it's usually comes down to this key element of communication.
Hey, I hate to belabor the question, but I think this is really important to understand. So when you said that a district, all they have to do is put it in writing, do they have to substantiate why they're saying no? Or do they just simply have to say no?
Yes, they have to put it in writing. It's called a prior written notice. And most districts try to shy away from this. I've literally had to say, I want you to put in the notes that I am requesting audio verbal techniques. And I know you're going to say no, but I want it in the notes that we are requesting that, so that you can go back and talk to your director and write a prior written notice telling us that you're not going to provide it, and tell us why. And I've had to do that on several occasions. And any of you parents that are listening that have asked for assessments and then have been denied assessments, they had to have written you a prior written notice. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So how do you prepare for your meeting? A lot of parents go to IEP meetings thinking, okay, I'm going to see what they have to tell me. No, you plan your meeting. You own it. Make your own agenda. What are your issues? What are the good things that are happening? What are the positive things that you're seeing your child come home from school with? You know, what are the concerns that you have? You know, is it about any other children? Is my child really getting speech? Can I have the speech logs? Can I have a copy of the data of that? Request all of the information presented by the district to provide prior to the meeting. So any assessments, any informal assessments, I hope a lot of teachers out there are doing informal reading and writing and math assessments. You know, I want to see that beforehand. Please bring some work. You know, we call it a portfolio. Please bring some of my child's classwork that he's been doing in the class, so we can visually see what my child's been doing. Of course, record 24 hours in advance. You need to request that. Can't stress that enough. Be transparent with the staff. If school staff are not transparent with you, that's one thing. But as a parent, always be transparent. Now, there's always some cards that you might hold, but it's about being transparent with the district. A lot of times, and I can't stress this enough, the staff may not be transparent with you, not because they don't want to, but because they're told not to, okay? Teachers, paraprofessionals, any of you that had a great working relationship with your paraprofessional one-to-one, and then all of a sudden they don't talk to you anymore. That's because they've been told that it's not their place, that the parent has to go to the teacher. I've also had the experience where the teacher sees the parent coming, the teacher turns around and walks the other way. So there's a lot of times the communication breaks down because staff are told, do not interact with this parent, because the relationship has gone south. So when you develop relationships, bring food to your meetings, bring water to your meetings. A lot of times your teachers, your paraprofessionals, even your administrators, none of them have had lunch and it's 3 o'clock. Okay, they've been running around serving kids all day. You know, they're not sitting around eating bonbons. But the fact of the matter is, it's a nicety. It's an olive branch to bring items to a meeting. Now, I do need to caution you. I had a parent when I worked down in Santa Monica, Malibu, when I ran all the preschools. She brought a whole cooler. And I'm like, oh, I started to sweat. And I'm the administrator. I started to sweat. I'm like, we don't need all that. She goes, oh, yes, we do. Well, I'll tell you what, we sat there from 8 o'clock until 1. Wow. And sure enough, she provided us lunch. So I just hesitate. Don't plan on having 4-hour meetings. And most importantly, bring someone. Someone else hears stuff you don't hear. Doesn't have to be an advocate. I've had people bring 15 people before to a meeting, honestly. And I've had parents that invited the president too. So, you know, you want to use some discretionary in regards to who you bring. You want to bring someone who knows your child and who can support you and can let you know what, maybe we need to take a break. Maybe, you know, maybe this isn't going so hot. Let's step outside for a minute. And always be organized. And I have lots of parents that are not organized. I had a parent that attended my training last March. She just hired me last month. And at my training, I told her, I said, no matter what you do, get all your kids' records and get a notebook and put the records in the notebook. And I kept saying to the mom, I'm like, just go ahead and scan and send me the docs. And finally, I figured it out. I said, you know what, I'm going to be in San Jose tomorrow. I'll just swing by and pick them up. Sure enough, she got the notebook, and the notebook looked brand new, still had the sticker on it, and she had literally taken all of the documents and shoved them in the notebook. She was embarrassed to give me the notebook. I said, don't even worry about it. I so understood. And when I got in my car, I kind of chuckled because I knew that was exactly what I was going to run into. So even if you don't have everything together, fake it till you make it. And I've had other administrators from school districts currently ask me, did you really tell your parents to do that? Yep. Fake it till you make it. Buy a notebook, buy the colored certs, get a bunch of paper, put holes in it, and stick it in the notebook and slap it on the table when you come.
You know, I want to add something to that because I'm not a big paper person. In fact, I always tell everyone to send everything to me electronically. But what I use is something called Evernote. And for those who don't have it, I'll include a link here in the show notes. But Evernote is an electronics note saving, and it allows you to search within PDFs. So, for example, if you have assessments from a couple years ago, you can do a word search for, you know, speech therapy, and it'll find every instance in all of your notes that has the word speech therapy. You can search by a tag. It's just, for me, a lot easier. You can bring it into the IEP. You can do it. So for those who are more electronically inclined like myself, that's the way to do it. I have scanned all his accumulative file into the folder, and I'm able to search 10 years ago in instance. So I like that. I want to ask something about bringing someone to meetings. And I might be guilty of this, but my son's instructional aide never comes to the IEPs, and that's the person who works with him the most. And I was thinking that makes no sense. So can I insist that the instructional aide be there?
You can request that the aide be there, but it is up to the discretion of the school district. And most likely they are not going to be at the IEP meeting. Right. School districts are always afraid of what paraprofessionals are going to say. And because they don't get paid much, and their benefits, I mean, when I ran the county office, I had 500 paraprofessionals, and I know what they got paid, and I know how they struggled. Right. You know, they were definitely in the poverty range, and, you know, according to financial standards. And so they are the closest with the kids. They deal with the messiest parts. They change the diapers. They get the bites. They get kicked. They get to run across the field and pull kids off chain link fences. Right. And nobody really thanks them a whole lot. And they are the people that tend to interface with parents a lot more than the teacher. And so they get them on the bus, off the bus, they see the bus driver, they see how the kids get on and off, and they start to build relationships with the parents. And a lot of times that is cut off by the school district. And I've seen it on both sides, where it's been extremely helpful to have paraprofessionals, and it's been extremely damaging for the school district, because just like any paraprofessional or teacher that sees stuff going on that they don't like, they pull the parent aside and say, you didn't hear this from me, but.
Right.
And, you know, if a teacher or paraprofessional ever does that, please do not ever throw them under the bus, because it will get back to the powers that be, and they will be disciplined.
Right. Thanks.
So, but yeah, you can, never hurts to ask. The worst thing they're going to say is no. So how do you get services? Okay, so you got to find their mistakes. Again, you got to be on top of what they've written down. And especially when they're at IEPs, you'll talk about a lot of stuff and then you'll see one little measly paragraph on the notes, when there was all kinds of discussions. So you've always got to have them read the notes before you leave. Look at the data after you request it. If you don't understand that data, you call in those folks that wrote the data and you ask them to explain it. Don't ever feel stupid. This is your child, your meeting. This is your life. You know, how is your kid going to get from A to B? You have to take an active role. You just can't say, oh, the school district will take care of it. Request all the assessments in advance. Read the past assessments and IEPs. And then, you know, and put them side by side so that you can see. Goal A was about behavior. Goal 1 was about behavior in 2014. Goal 1 is about behavior in 2015. Is it the same exact writing? Is it the same language? Is it the same goal? I have looked and done records reviews of kids' IEPs where they had the same exact behavioral goals 3 years in a row.
Right.
And the teacher sat there after I brought this up, and I brought it up quite nicely. Because basically I'm telling her she didn't do her job and the program's not working. And she got all upset and started being belligerent in the meeting. And I'm like, look, the goals are exactly the same. You're going to tell me this program's working? It's not. So we got to do something different.
Right.
And then she ended up telling the parent, well, apparently you know more than I do, because I schooled the parent on how to participate in the meeting. And so, you know, it's, you got to find their mistakes, and they make them. And it's not like they're doing it on purpose. Just there are teachers out there that do get lazy,
right,
and write the same IEP for every single kid. So there's a question sheet that Keith will send out, but some of them are, you know, you want to always ask, what does this mean? How does this translate to the classroom? Can you give me an example? How long do we wait to see if this is working? And you're allowed to have all that information. So when you get to the meeting, you've always got to remember, and I always ask parents to just print this out, type it out, write it on your hand, put it on the back of your wrist, whatever, because you forget. People bully you in these IEP meetings and you don't even realize it's happening. So this is your kid, your meeting. Bring your notebook, record 24 hours in advance, and have your questions written down, because when you get to the IEP meeting, you're going to be super, super nervous. But if you do this minimal piece of preparation, you're going to relieve your anxiety a ton and bring your agenda. So if your school doesn't have a written agenda, after you bring an agenda to a meeting, trust me, they're going to bring an agenda to the next meeting, because that shows that you're more organized than the team.
And one thing I'd like to add to that slide, Martina, is bring someone with you.
Yes, yes, definitely. Okay, typical agenda should look like this: introductions, purpose, parent rights. They always say, do you want a copy of your parent rights? For those of you that are brand new, or are moving from one team to another, I do this selectively, but whenever I have a parent that's at an initial IEP meeting, I prepare the team in advance saying, I will expect you to give the parent a synopsis of their parental rights and safeguards. Now, I did this as an interview question when I was the director at San Jose Unified.
Mhm.
And not one candidate could do it. Not one. So that is a clear indication that some of the folks that are working with your child don't even know what your rights are. So you've really got to do your homework. So a lot of times, the parents say, no, I've got a copy of the parent rights, but could you just review them for me? And, and I've had top psychologists that just, they said 3 or 4 things, but it's like, no, there's a list of like 15 key elements of your parental rights and safeguards that they should be able to just whip off the tongue. So parent concerns, if the meeting is volatile, usually they'll wait on parent concerns because they'll go through the assessments and goals and services before they get to the concerns, because they will tell you this. It's quite possible we'll address your concerns through the discussion of assessment goals and services. So we're going to get to parent concerns later. So not many school districts do that, but some do. Now, here's the key element. Assessments drive goals. Goals drive services, and assessment goals services drive placement. So for those of you that are already in special education or getting ready to get into special education, the assessment pieces are very key. And those of you that are out there that have paid thousands of dollars for private assessments, you know what I'm talking about, because you have to go out and either ask for an independent educational evaluation, or because the district won't even assess your child, you go out and get a private assessment, or you get an assessment through your insurance to prove my child's autistic, to prove, that they're ADD or ADHD. So it's really important to pay attention to what the assessments say and to understand what they mean. How are the goals written? Is it accessible? Because they'll always say, oh, we're going to take data by observation. I never let that float through, ever. Never, never. Observation is, that to me says fly by the seat of your pants. Right. I want to see data. I want to see what you did. I want to see a chart. What's the chart that you're using to collect data on how many times my child is able to respond to a command within 2 prompts? I want to see that. And then, of course, there's discussion. And a big piece with the state of California and other states also is, did the parent have a meaningful participation within the meeting? So they need to be documenting in the notes what's going on. And then they do their closing, review everything, and then they look for signatures.
Can I ask you a question regarding assessments? Because you said that districts don't even want to do that. Are they able to deny an initial assessment if a parent has a belief that their kid has a learning disability of some kind, that they can say, no, we don't even want to do that?
Yes. They can deny an assessment. And typically when they deny an assessment, it's because your child is getting okay grades in school. Now, school districts are starting to understand you have to look at the whole child, not just their grades. But many, many times, especially larger school districts, because they don't, have enough resources to do all the assessments they would like to, a lot of times if your kid's getting A, B's, B's, C's, D's, and maybe even an F here and D's and C's, they'll say, you know what, your child has the right to be average, and we're not going to assess. And that's why they say every child has the right to be average. Now, with that caveat said, just spoke to a parent last night. Child's up for expulsion. Has never been assessed for special ed, but has been denied twice. And so now the kid's up for expulsion, and the issues that were brought to my attention are not expellable offenses, really. They're just tired of the kid, and they won't assess him. So I said, well, this is what happened. And she asked way back in elementary school. Now the kid's in middle school. And it's a middle school that I've dealt with before, so I already know what their plan is. They're just going to push the kid out the door and send them off to another school. And so districts do it all the time. They do it all the time. They're given lines drawn on what kids get assessed and what kids don't. So don't ever be afraid to fight the no answer.
Okay, thank you.
So for signatures, real important. Never sign at the meeting. Never.
Ever.
Even if it's a good day. Now, if you have an advocate like myself or somebody that knows the law, that knows what's going on, and they say, no, go ahead and sign, then go ahead and sign. Very rarely do I ever do that, ever. Like in the last 80 IEPs, I've probably had 3 parents sign off at the meeting. Okay.
I agree.
Always review the document. Always review the document, because it's your child. You don't hear everything. And that's why, you know, having the recording, if something went kind of loosey-goosey and the conversation trailed off, then it gives you an opportunity to go back and hear it. And I'll tell you this, you know what? Did an addendum. The county office lost it. They misplaced it. They couldn't find it.
Okay. Give them the benefit of the doubt.
So, you know, the director comes to all the meetings that I'm at, and I said, well, you know what? We have a recording of it, so I guess you're going to have to handpick which secretary gets to retype the whole IEP, because, you know, we're not going to just go with a lost document. Well, come to find out, the parent found her copy. Mm-hmm. So, you know, don't ever count on districts being able to keep a hold of your kids' files, because they do get lost. And whenever possible, definitely leave with a copy. Now, I understand and have been there where the copier doesn't work, the computer doesn't work, the system is down, the electronic system is down that they're using, and so on and so forth. All those kinds of things happen. And so, you know, life does intervene. But most of the time, you should be able to leave with a draft copy. They will always say, oh, well, we want to fix the spelling errors and stuff like that. So what? Then send me a fixed copy with the spelling errors, because districts have altered the information of the notes because the person put in specific, you know, Jennifer said that the child really does need additional staffing. The district will go out and restrike that out. They will. So don't ever underestimate that. Okay, how will you be positively stroked? Okay, if you're in a situation where it's contentious and you feel like your kid's not getting what they need, and you get really emotional about it, okay? They let you tell your story. If you get to an IEP meeting and you're telling your story every time, you really need to back up and rethink how you're approaching your IEP meetings. Because this is what they do, is they let you tell your story, you get to cry a little bit or scream or get up and storm out and then come back to the table, and then they pour you with positive energy and empathy, and they tell you what a wonderful parent you are, and you're doing the very best that you can, and we appreciate your communication. Oh, they will just lay it on so thick. And then you leave the meeting feeling great. And I call this the snow globe effect, because a snow globe looks much more beautiful when it's all shook up than it does with all the snow settled. And so, just as an example, I was working with a parent. She was going to meet with an attorney after our meeting because we had finally fixed everything, okay? Took us 6 to 7 months, but we got it fixed. And this was a kid that had an IQ of 138, autistic, and was beating the snot out of kids, okay? But they were saying, nope, he doesn't need an IEP. He was denied, but they put him on a 504 plan, which was nothing useful. So we finally got the IEP, finally got the goals, finally got the behavior, finally got a one-to-one, got everything we needed. Then the school site had had enough of him, and so we were moving him to another school site. And we walk out to the car, and the parent says, well, should I really go see the attorney? And I literally turned to her and said, do you need me to slap you in the face? I said, absolutely. I said, do you realize they're doing the happy dance in there? They're never going to see your child again. They probably got a cake in the teacher's room, for crying out loud. She's like, well, that's what happens. She's like, I get all upset and I cry, and then they say nice things to me. And I said, and then you leave with nothing, right? She's like, yeah, you're right. She's like, they do it all the time. I'm like, exactly. So yes, she did go see the attorney. Yes, she did get compensatory services after we got everything into place. Yes, he did go to another general ed campus. He's doing great. And here's what happened 2 days after, the non-public agency that was hired, the person showed up unannounced at her door and indicated that the school district really wanted to put the kid in a county ED classroom. The kid's not even emotionally disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, whoa, I did not even see that coming. But you need to understand that when folks come to the table, they have all kinds of different strategies, and they change their strategies up all the time. And this particular strategy is one that they use a lot. They are counting on you to lose your cool. So never sign at the meeting unless adding the service you want for your child, they're adding a service that you want, and it can't start without your signature. So if they finally say yes to partial one-to-one or assistive technology, sign on the spot for that particular service, not the whole thing, okay? Unless that's the only thing that's being added, all right? Because it takes school districts time to buy equipment. They have to go through all kinds of red tape bureaucracy in order to get the equipment there. It takes time to hire staff. And so you need to give HR and the business office process their leeway as much as possible.
So let me ask you a question, Martina. So relative to, and I feel like I've been positively stroked in the past, and I left a meeting going, wow. The next day, I'm feeling good that same day, and the next day I go, wait, nothing actually occurred. The last meeting I had an agenda. This is before you and I met, and I had some specific things, some things that I wanted. Everybody knew what I was trying to get, and then I kept the meeting going like that. And we actually got for my son what he needed, which was additional speech, et cetera. So my question is, does the district actually sit around and talk about positively stroking parents? Or is it an unconscious thing that people do on their own? I mean, I've never been on the opposite side of the table. I've always been the parent, but are they thinking, okay, we need to positively stroke this person so we can get him out of here to the next IEP and we'll do nothing for him? Is that something they consciously think about?
Yeah, and I'm gonna, that's on the next slide. So okay. For the last point here, always review the IEP and take at least 24 hours to review it.
Okay.
Don't feel pressured to send the paperwork back. So what you're talking about is the game.
The game.
There was a specific training that has gone underground for administrators. And you laugh, but it's true.
Wow.
It is 100% true. It is in writing. I cannot get my hands on it, but what I can tell you is that just based on my 9 years of administrative experience in 4 different situations, 4 different levels, the good old boys network has really disappeared. And now the administrative piece is who can get higher faster on the food chain and promote your career. You know, if you're a real go-getter, there's principals out there that just want to be principals forever, and those are the fantastic people. But there's other people that just want to go up the chain and become superintendents and then work for the California Department of Education or the state education system that they work with. They're just all about the politics. Mm-hmm. So the game piece is they make a plan before the IEP. There's very few teams I've sat down with that have not had discussions. Now, predetermination is a whole other thing, but specifically, I was told, do not put any additional staff on an IEP until cabinet approves it. That's illegal. That's part of the game, okay? Telling teachers, don't tell them about that program is part of the game. One of the moms that hired me, she's a single mom. She used to be a teacher. She had to quit her teaching job to take care of her child. She was the one-to-one in the classroom. She hired me, and I told her, I said, you know what? You don't go in there anymore. You let them deal with your child and his behavior from now on. And it was the hardest thing she ever had to do. But we ended up getting him into a really great classroom, and she turned to me after we got everything done and said, she said, they would have never have offered that classroom unless I had hired you, because I didn't even know it existed. She goes, I was told by someone else through the system that that was the classroom he really needed to be in. But the district had made no awareness to anybody in the district except for the kids that were in it, to those families, that it even existed. So There's all types of game pieces that happen in regards to how to leverage families, guardians, parents, grandmas, grandpas. You know, a lot of grandparents take care of their children's children now. And that's why I say your part of the game is you become an advocate. You understand the law. Now, are you going to know the law? Like, you know, I can sit here and recapitulate laws all day long to nauseam. But is that your goal? No. Your goal is to know your child, what your child needs, and what is your child's rights. And how do you get to that point where you know you're getting what you're supposed to be getting from the district? Because I can't tell you how many times parents have said, so if they've only shown me these 2 programs and I don't like either of them, what are my options? I said, well, did you ask? And they said, yeah. They said, this is it. One or the other. Your choice. And a program specialist went behind the back because he's still brand new. He's still in his first year, so he hasn't been beaten down by the system yet. He went back to the parent and said, they showed the classroom without any of the kids or the staff in it. They just showed him the actual physical classroom. And the program specialist said, I really wouldn't recommend this classroom. It's not the right emotional match for your child. But I'm showing it to you because it is one of the middle school ED classes. Mm-hmm. So it's for the parent to be part of this game. You have to come to the meeting educated. You have to come to the meeting prepared, organized, bring your notebook. There's tons of stuff on rights law. If you've never looked at rights law webpage, do it today. Please write a sticky. If you do nothing else, write your district for your kids' records, go out and get a notebook, request 24-hour notice for your IEP, and go on Rights Law. There's tons of books on there that you should be purchasing. And if you don't have the funds to purchase them, you can go to a local like Parents Helping Parents or Draft, or there's all kinds of different organizations all over, and there's one near you somewhere that will have access to these public documents. You can go online and download them. They're free. And you bring that with you with some tabs in it, stickies in it, and purposely plan to access one of them. Because I'm telling you, nothing makes people more scared is if they think you know more than they do. Or if you're dealing with someone who thinks they know everything and then they become that narcissistic person at the table and then starts shutting everything down. So you got to really tease out who the players are, what their personalities are, and what you can get away with at a meeting.
Martina, I want to add something because I think this was helpful for me, is parents talking to other parents has been so useful. My son, as you know, is essentially nonverbal, and he was getting like 2 sessions a week of speech of like 15 minutes each. And I didn't know what I didn't know. I mean, I knew it wasn't enough speech for him, and I was always asking for more speech. But I was talking to some other parents whose kids can speak, but were at a different school within my school district, and their kid was getting 3 sessions a week of 35 minutes each. I'm thinking, how is my son who can't speak getting only 2 sessions, and this person's son who can speak is getting 3, almost twice as much minutes? And I realized it was because of me, meaning that I did not know what I did not know, so I wasn't advocating. So when I went to that meeting and I asked the question of the district of, how is it that this person, and I could name their name if they wanted to, and they're like, then all of a sudden the discussion changed, and now they're talking about more speech for my son, which in case I did get. So I would encourage parents to find out about what other programs or services are by talking to other parents. Because if you don't know, you don't know. And other parents may have kids in those classrooms. They're willing to share information and resources. You can't be an island unto yourself. You've got to talk to other people. So
yeah, and in California specifically, the SELPA is supposed to list all the programs of each district that are in the SELPA. So if you don't know what programs are in your SELPA, call your SELPA director and ask. I had a parent tell me that they called up the SELPA director and they repeated what the school district said, and she said that's absolutely incorrect. You need to go back to the school district and let them know that they can't do that. So there are good people at the top. You know, I don't want to shade it like all school districts are bad and there's nothing good going on. There are good programs and there are talented people, and they know how to leverage within their own positions to do the right things for kids or get as far as they can before they're told, okay, enough. So please do know that there's a lot of great people out there. And so you really need to know your school's perspective, where they come from. If you have a special ed friendly principal, you're going to have a much easier life. If you don't, it's going to be hard. Know what your goals are. Know your action plan. Know what you want for your education plan. Know what you want to see your child doing, you know, further on.
Okay. Hey, Martina, thank you for the excellent presentation. And I've asked you a lot of questions. I had some people who had sent me emails earlier in the show, and obviously we'll open up to whoever's in there that wants to ask questions. But I had some other follow-up questions and a clarification too. SELPA is something that's unique in California. Can you explain for those who are not in California what a SELPA is? I don't think any other state has them, do they? Are you aware of?
No, they don't. It's something that's specifically written into California law. And it was another level of supervision of making sure that school districts are providing the correct programming and also following all the legislation and writing compliant IEPs. So the SELPA director, Special Education Local Planning Director, is responsible to make sure whatever districts are in the SELPA are following all of the laws and implementing programs appropriately and not breaking any compliance rules. Now, with that being said, in California, some SELPAs are single SELPAs. So they're all by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, San Jose is all by itself. So the director is also the SELPA director. So it's a little bit of a conflict, I see. Or there's other places, excuse me, where the SELPA director is also the director of educational services. So it can get kind of messy. They should be separate. But in other states, it just depends on which state you're in. There's different levels. There's always going to be a director level to go to. And then depending on what state you live in, you just have to really know what the hierarchy is for your school.
Okay. Now, this is something that I know I wanted to know, and I'm going to throw it out there because I'm curious other people would want to know too. Why do districts delay, deny, and omit services for parents? Is it because, for children, is it because they know some parents are likely to fight back and other parents are not, and it's a cost-benefit analysis? How does that work? I mean, what's the purpose or reasons for it?
So the answer to all those suggestions is yes, okay? Some districts are so far out in the boondocks that they literally don't have the resources. Like, they only have one speech pathologist to serve 120 kids. Okay, so now is that the parent's problem? No. So, I mean, the school's on the hook to provide those services. The omit piece is, yeah, the districts do tend to not tell you everything they need to know. So they do omit information. They deny assessments a lot simply because of resources and also lack of knowledge. Although you're sitting at a team with people with degrees and credentials, it doesn't mean everybody's equal. The special ed teacher at school A is not as talented as a special ed teacher at school B. So their experiences are what enrich them, you know, and I've always been a big fan of good teaching is good teaching.
Right.
Whether it's special ed or general ed. I mean, general ed teachers have always thought that special ed teachers like have this secret box of strategies. It's not. It's just really good teaching. Now, we do have specific programs like Teach you know, there's all kinds of applied behavioral analysis programs. There's specific ones that general ed teachers wouldn't typically have access to, but that's above and beyond. Those are children that are having much more difficulty. So then there are administrators that literally tell you, just wait until they sue us. And there are, unfortunately, administrators that say, I'm so tired of dealing with this parent, just tell them no. So when you build that relationship with your district, it really does make a difference on how you do it, because if you go in with lions and tigers and bears, you're probably not going to get too far. That's why I always let families know you need to build the trust and a supportive, communicative environment in order to really get what you need for your child. Not to say that sometimes you just have to call it quits and just say, okay, we're done. We're going to stick Martina on you. She's going to be like white on rice. You're not going to even be able to breathe without moving. So all of those things.
It goes back to that old adage of, you can get more things with honey than with a stick, right? So if you can get what you need in that way, then it works.
But it's not being a pushover, though. There's a big difference between being assertive and pushy as opposed to sitting back and just say, oh, okay, whatever you say. That if you're that type of person, you definitely need an advocate, because they will be lying straight to your face and you won't even know it.
Right. Now, what kind of recourses does someone have? Is it only that due process? And for those who don't know about due process, as I understand it, it's the parent's right or the district's right to sue and force something to happen.
Yes.
Is that a quick synopsis of it? Or?
Yeah, and you can file for mediation only. Okay. Most cases are not finished in due process, although you can file for due process, and then there is a requirement to see if you can work it out through mediation. Mm-hmm. And so they schedule a mediation, you sit down, it takes typically a whole day, try to work your differences out. The mediated settlement is silent. So in other words, nobody knows what the outcomes are except for the people involved as far as, what people have to do. As opposed to when you go to due process, you have an administrative law judge, and your law judge might be well endowed with knowledge of special ed, and your administrative law judge might not. And your administrative law judge might be a district-friendly attorney, and your administrative law judge might be a family-friendly law attorney. So it's really a crapshoot, because whatever the judge says, then you are stuck to it. You're binded, the district and the family. And so a lot of times the mediation process tends to be a better way to go.
Now, recourse. I mean, I was having some challenges with my district, much better now, but I was having some challenges with them. And we filed a complaint with the Department of Education to calling some toll-free number. And it sounded good. They got off to a fast start. I was like, wow, this is going to be great. I've got the CDE coming down in the district. They're going to force these things. Well, then they went silent, never heard from them again. And I just don't have time to fight everybody on every front. So I just sort of let that go. But what kind of recourse does a parent have that a district has to listen to? Or do we just sort of like pray and only have the option of going to due process?
Okay, so you always want to try to use the course of least resistance. So yes, parents can definitely use Office of Civil Rights, which is a federal complaint, and then also a compliance complaint, which is state level. Now, although the state has, specifically in California, I can't speak to other states, well, actually I can. Florida's pretty on the downside as far as supporting parents. But you can use that complaint process to get things done. Now, I have written complaints for families, and they actually got a one-to-one aide, behavioral trained in autism, and the state mandated it, which I've only seen once, but it did happen. And so the state is taking more of a positive control as opposed to just slapping districts on the wrist. Now, at the local level, what you can do, of course, is go up the chain of command, meet with the director, meet with the assistant superintendent, meet with the superintendent. You can go to your board meetings and say, I've been working with the school district for XYZ amount of days. I have written this person, written that person. I've gotten communication back. I've had a meeting. We scheduled a meeting. The meeting got canceled. I've gotten no recourse since I started this process August 15th. It is now November. And I want you to know that this is a problem and someone from the board needs to address it. knowing your board members and going to board meetings is extremely powerful because they are elected and they want to keep their job.
Okay. I have someone here trying to ask a question. So if you could ask the question in the chat room, that would be great, because I don't know how to do it other than that. Let's see here. Can you sort of talk about, I mean, you talked briefly about it. I'm just curious. You left a very lucrative job to work with parents as an advocate, which I'm sure doesn't pay quite the same as before. Tell me a little bit why you did that.
Well, you know what? I worked for Monterey County Office of Education, so I was running a huge program. When I stepped in, it was a $40 million program, and I answered to 26 superintendents. And that is a tall order. And also, you know, in the course of that too, also generated funds for the districts. But, you know, we were going through a process where districts start to take back some of the programs. So we were able to, you know, cut 13 million of the program and do reductions also, which was about another 11 million. So we got it just under 30 million by the time I left in 4 years. And so the program was working quite well, and you know, it had truly now become a county program, because the county's only supposed to really serve, it's a secondary source program to serve real severe kids. Mm-hmm. So at that point though, I needed a change. I needed something different, something just a little, you know, back to a district kind of deal. And I looked at San Jose, and they had Opportunity 21, and it was all about kids, and it was all about, and you can go on there, it's on their website. And so I started doing what I do, which is create relationships and start pulling everybody together. And that's what they asked me to do. Then around November, I kind of was told, no, that's not really what we wanted. We wanted you to keep saying no. I was like, oh, okay. So at that point, you know, that was a very direct way to say we'd rather be sued than to provide programs. Even though San Jose is huge, they have lots of programs, they have great programs, they have great staff, great teachers, great paraprofessionals, you know, but the philosophy behind Opportunity 21 is a little bit different than what they broadcast. So at that point, I knew that I wouldn't be able to do public education anymore. It just had become too political, and the conversations weren't about children anymore. So, or very little. I can't say anymore because that's, you know, too all-inclusive. So at that point, I started making a plan to just do the same thing, but just in a different capacity.
So we have come up to our hour, Martina, so we really need to wrap up. I will give you one last words to say. Anything you'd like to leave us with? Any words of wisdom?
Well, all I can say is that you are the best advocate for your child. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to call me. I have parents that call me all the time. And that doesn't necessarily mean to solicit my services. It's just if you need a point in the right direction, because I'm all about kids and supporting kids and making sure that parents have the right information so that they can sleep at night.
Excellent. Well, I just want to make sure people are aware you can hire Martina, and I'll include a link to her website here. And she can work anywhere in the United States. So even though we're here in California, she's able to provide records review, consulting services, and other things that might be of help to people who have children with disabilities who have an IEP. Again, I'm Keith Caldwell with Our Special Needs Children, and we're continuing to bring you what we hope is good content. You guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.